It was a quiet afternoon on a crowded city bus. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting long golden streaks across tired faces. The air carried the low hum of the engine, mixed with the faint buzz of people scrolling on their phones. A mother whispered to her child. A student leaned against the window with headphones in. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just another ordinary ride home. Near the back of the bus sat an older man, simple jacket, calm posture, hands resting loosely in his lap. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He wasn't looking at anyone. His breathing was slow, steady, almost meditative. If you walked past him, you'd think he was just another quiet passenger, but sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the deepest storm. 3 stops later, the bus doors opened with a sharp hiss. Heavy footsteps climbed aboard. Loud voice. Aggressive energy. The kind of presence that shifts the atmosphere without permission. A few passengers glanced up, then quickly looked away. The older man didn't move, didn't react, didn't even lift his eyes. But the energy on the bus had changed. Because in the next few moments, someone was going to mistake calmness for weakness. And that mistake was about to turn an ordinary afternoon ride into something no one on that bus would ever forget. Stay with me. Because what happened next proved one simple truth. You should never judge strength by silence. The bus jerked forward as the doors closed. The heavy footsteps moved down the aisle. He was tall. Broad shoulders, loud breathing. The kind of man who didn't just enter a space, he claimed it. His boots hit the floor with unnecessary force, as if every step was a performance. A few passengers subtly adjusted themselves, shrinking into their seats. He scanned the bus like he was looking for something. Or someone. The driver hit a small pothole. The bus bounced, and in that split second, the tall passenger stumbled forward. His shoulder slammed directly into the older man sitting near the back. The impact wasn't dramatic, but the reaction was. "Watch where you're going, old man!" The voice cut through the quiet bus like broken glass. Several heads turned instantly. The older man lifted his eyes slowly. Not irritated, not defensive, just present. "My mistake," he said calmly. His voice was low, even, controlled. That should have been the end of it. But the tall man wasn't looking for resolution. He smirked. "Oh, it's your mistake. You didn't even move." A couple of teenagers in the back began whispering. Someone subtly pulled out their phone. The older man adjusted slightly in his seat, giving space without surrendering it. "I said it was my mistake," he repeated. No sarcasm. No fear. That calmness did something unexpected. It irritated the aggressor more, because bullies feed on reaction, and he wasn't getting one. "You think you're funny." The tall man snapped. The bus driver glanced in the rearview mirror but didn't intervene. The older man looked straight ahead again, as if the conversation was already over. That silence felt heavier than an insult. Passengers were now fully alert. The atmosphere had shifted from casual commuting to quiet tension. The tall man leaned closer. "You deaf too?" No response. Just slow breathing, measured, stable. And that's when something subtle happened. The older man's posture changed. Not aggressively, not dramatically. Just aligned, his feet straightened slightly. His feet positioned more firmly on the floor. Small adjustments. But intentional ones. The tall passenger didn't notice. But one man sitting across the aisle did. He narrowed his eyes. There was something different about this older man. Something disciplined. The aggressor laughed loudly, trying to pull the bus into his performance. "Look at this guy. Probably hasn't lifted anything heavier than a newspaper in 20 years. A few uncomfortable chuckles, but no one truly joined him, because something felt off. The older man slowly looked up again. This time their eyes met, and for a brief second, the tall passenger's grin faded. There was no anger in the older man's eyes, no fear either, just awareness, complete awareness. As if he had already calculated every possible outcome. As if he wasn't reacting, he was allowing. The bus hit another small bump. The aggressor grabbed a nearby pole to steady himself. The older man didn't move at all. Perfect balance. That detail didn't go unnoticed by the watching passengers. The tall man scoffed. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood." Still calm, still silence. That silence now felt deliberate, strategic. The aggressor stepped closer again, invading space. "You think I won't do anything?" The older man finally spoke. "You already are." Soft, controlled, almost instructional. The words confused the aggressor for a second. What's that supposed to mean? The older man didn't answer. He simply observed, breathing steady, hands relaxed, no clenched fists, no tension in the shoulders. That composure began to shift the power dynamic. Because confidence that doesn't shout is unsettling. A woman near the front whispered to her friend, "Why does that guy seem so calm?" Her friend responded quietly, "I don't think he's worried." The aggressor noticed people watching. His ego flared. He needed dominance. He needed proof. So he raised his voice again. "You know what your problem is, old man? The older man met his eyes once more. "No," he replied gently. "What? I don't?" It wasn't sarcasm, it wasn't mocking. It was literal, and that composure made the aggressor feel smaller, which made him more dangerous. The bus slowed for the next stop. But no one got off. No one wanted to miss what was unfolding. The tall passenger rolled his neck, cracking it loudly. "You're testing my patience." The older man gave the slightest nod. "Then you should protect it." That line hung in the air. Passengers felt it. The aggressor stepped even closer now, close enough to grab. And that's when the energy on the bus shifted completely. Not because of shouting. Not because of threats, but because the older man's eyes sharpened. Just slightly. Like a switch had been flipped internally. Still calm, still balanced, but now, ready. And everyone on that bus could feel it. Something was about to happen. Not chaotic, not wild, but decisive. And the tall passenger, he had no idea. He had just walked into a situation he didn't understand. The bus felt smaller now. The air thicker. Every passenger could sense it. This wasn't random anymore. This was deliberate. The tall man stepped even closer, towering over the seated older man. "You think you're smarter than me?" he said, voice low but sharp. The older man didn't respond. Didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't explain. He simply looked at him, not up in fear, but forward with awareness. That composure felt insulting. The aggressor laughed loudly again, but there was tension in it now. "Look at you. Acting calm like you're some kind of hero." A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. A teenager near the back whispered, "Why doesn't he just move seats?" But an older woman shook her head. "He's not scared." That word lingered. Not scared. The tall man noticed people watching. Phones were clearly out now. Whispers spreading down the aisle. His pride couldn't handle it. So he escalated. He kicked lightly at the older man's shoe. "Stand up. No movement." "I said stand up." The older man slowly lifted his eyes again. There was something different now. Not anger, but decision. "I'm fine where I am," he said calmly. The tall man smirked. "No, you're not." He reached down and grabbed the older man's shoulder roughly. Gasps echoed softly through the bus. The grip was aggressive, dominating, the kind meant to provoke a reaction. Still nothing. The older man didn't flinch, didn't tense, didn't pull away, and that lack of reaction felt unnatural, because when most people are grabbed unexpectedly, their body jerks. Their shoulders tighten. Their breathing spikes. But his didn't. It stayed slow, controlled. The tall man squeezed harder. "You think I won't drag you up?" The older man looked at the hand on his shoulder, then back at the aggressor's eyes. "You should let go." The words weren't loud, but they weren't a request either. They were a warning. And something about the tone caused a brief flicker of hesitation. Just a second. But pride overruled instinct. "Oh yeah, or what?" The bus driver was now fully watching through the mirror. Passengers had stopped pretending not to notice. The entire vehicle felt frozen in anticipation. The aggressor shoved him slightly, not enough to injure, but enough to humiliate, or at least attempt to. And that's when something subtle changed. The older man stood up, slowly, not rushed, not reactive, just rising. And when he stood, the dynamic shifted instantly. Because he wasn't small, he wasn't fragile, he wasn't shaking. He stood balanced. Feet grounded, shoulders relaxed, chin level. No clenched jaw, no visible rage. Just stillness. The tall man blinked once. Something wasn't matching the narrative in his head anymore. "You think standing makes a difference?" he sneered. The older man didn't answer immediately. He simply adjusted his stance slightly. One foot angled, weight distributed evenly. Anyone trained would recognize it. Most passengers wouldn't. But one man near the middle aisle narrowed his eyes again. That posture wasn't random. It was trained. The aggressor shoved him again. Harder this time. The older man took one half step back, absorbing the force instead of resisting it. No stumble. No loss of balance. Just redirection. That detail made two passengers exchange looks. How did he not fall? The tall man felt it too. That push should have worked. It should have shaken him. It didn't. Now frustration was replacing confidence. "You're playing games with me." The older man finally spoke. "I don't play games." The simplicity of the sentence hit differently. No emotion. No drama. Just fact. The bus was completely silent now except for the engine. Even the child near the front had stopped talking. The aggressor stepped forward again, invading space deliberately. Their faces were inches apart. "You think you scare me?" The older man held eye contact. "No." That answer confused him. No, I think you're upset." That line landed like a slap. Because it reframed the entire situation. Not dominance. Not intimidation. Just emotional instability. The tall man's face tightened. He grabbed the older man's collar now. Full grip. Aggressive. A woman near the window gasped audibly. "Someone stop him," she whispered. But no one moved, because something deeper was happening. The older man's breathing remained steady, but his eyes sharpened. That switch again. The invisible one. The moment where patience ends and readiness begins. He looked down at the hand gripping his collar, then back up slowly. You've crossed the line. This time the tone was different. Still calm, but final. The aggressor smirked. Oh yeah, what are you going to do about it? The bus hit a small curve in the road. The vehicle swayed slightly, and in that subtle movement, the older man adjusted his footing perfectly. Balanced, rooted, prepared. The aggressor didn't see it, but the audience did. Because now everyone felt it. The moment was here. The tension had nowhere left to go. The bullying had crossed from words to contact, and when disrespect becomes physical, consequences follow. The tall man tightened his grip one more time. And that was the last mistake he was going to make on that bus. The tall man's fist tightened in the older man's collar. For a split second, everything froze. The hum of the engine, the rattle of the windows, even the whisper stopped. It was the kind of silence that only happens right before something irreversible. You've crossed the line, the older man had said. The aggressor laughed in his face. Or what? And then he shoved him again. Harder. This time it wasn't a test, it was an attack. But what happened next was so fast, most passengers didn't understand it. They only saw the result. Because instead of resisting the shove, the older man moved with it. Not backward, not forward, but slightly to the side. His body rotated just enough. His hand rose not to strike but to guide. He didn't punch. He didn't swing, he redirected. The aggressor's own momentum betrayed him. In one smooth, controlled motion, the older man's hand slid to the wrist, gripping his collar. A subtle twist, a shift in weight, a pivot of the hips. The tall man's balance disappeared. His feet scrambled for stability, but there was none. The bus aisle became his enemy. Within a blink, he was on his knees, then on his side, then flat on the floor. The impact echoed against the metal interior. Gas erupted across the bus. No wild violence, no flurry of blows, just physics, applied correctly. The older man stepped back immediately, not advancing, not attacking, just resetting his stance. Calm again, the tall man groaned, stunned more by confusion than pain. What did you? He tried to push himself up, but as he placed weight on his arm, the older man gently pressed his wrist down again. Controlled pressure. Not brutal, precise, the kind that sends a message through the nervous system. Don't, the older man said quietly. Not threatening, instructional. The aggressor froze. Because something in that tone felt undeniable. The passengers were wide-eyed now, phones fully raised, whispers spreading rapidly. How did he do that? He didn't even hit him. It was like he just folded him. The bus driver pulled the vehicle over abruptly. Doors still closed, engine running, but no one moving. The older man released the pressure slowly, then stepped back again, giving space, offering dignity. The tall man staggered up halfway, rage and embarrassment mixing on his face. You tripped me. But his voice lacked confidence now, because deep down he knew that wasn't a trip, that was control. He lunged forward again, desperation overriding logic. And once more, the older man didn't attack. He adjusted, one small sidestep, one guiding motion at the elbow. The aggressor spun awkwardly, colliding shoulder first into a bus seat. A sharp thud, more gasps, still no punches, still no wild aggression, just redirection. The older man's breathing never changed, not once. That detail unsettled everyone watching, because real fear changes breathing. Adrenaline spikes it. But his remained steady, like this wasn't chaos, like this was routine. The aggressor finally stopped trying to rush. He was breathing heavily now, sweat forming at his temples. Pride shattered. You think you're tough, he spat. The older man tilted his head slightly. No, simple, honest. I think you're out of control. That sentence landed harder than any strike could have. The tall man looked around. The entire bus was watching him, not as a dominant figure, but as someone who had miscalculated badly. His earlier confidence had evaporated. He attempted one final grab, slower this time, and that's when the older man applied something different. A firmer wrist control, a downward angle, not harmful, but decisive. The aggressor dropped to one knee instantly. A sharp intake of breath escaped him. Now he understood. This wasn't luck, this wasn't coincidence. This was training. Decades of it. The older man leaned slightly closer and said quietly, I asked you to stop. No anger, no revenge. Just consequence. The bus was completely silent now. Even the engine sounded distant. The aggressor nodded faintly. The fight had left him, not physically destroyed, but psychologically disarmed. The older man released him immediately. Stepped back again, hands relaxed at his sides, offering peace. The tall man didn't charge again, didn't insult again, didn't perform again. He stayed down for a second longer than necessary, processing. The power dynamic had flipped, not through brutality, but through control. And that's when someone near the front whispered the words that began spreading down the aisle like electricity. Wait, I think I know who that is. Another passenger leaned forward. No way. Phones zoomed in closer now. Recognition was forming. Because this wasn't just an older man defending himself. This was someone who had spent a lifetime mastering balance, a lifetime mastering discipline. And the bully. He had mistaken stillness for weakness. The older man adjusted his jacket calmly, as if the moment had already passed. But the real shift, the one that would change the entire atmosphere of that bus, was only seconds away. The bus was silent now, but not the usual quiet. It was heavy, almost tangible, the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. Every passenger had their eyes on the older man at the back. Every whisper had died. Even the engine's hum seemed distant, replaced by the collective tension in the air. The tall aggressor had stopped moving, kneeling awkwardly, trying to regain some sense of dignity. His chest rose and fell rapidly, sweat glinting on his forehead, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped the seat in front of him. He wanted to look dominant again, but every second he spent kneeling reminded him of the last failed attempt to intimidate the calm, older man. The older man adjusted slightly in his seat, almost imperceptibly. He didn't smile. He didn't glare. He just exhaled slowly, measured, controlled. His eyes scanned the bus, noticing the small reactions of those around him, the subtle widening of pupils, the quiet gasps, the passengers' instinctive leaning away from the aggressor. He wasn't speaking yet, but the air around him had already changed. Some of the younger passengers exchanged nervous glances. One whispered under his breath, "Is this guy trained? Something feels off." The aggressor's bravado faltered. "Stop staring at me," he barked. His voice was sharp, but now it carried uncertainty. A few passengers flinched at his tone, while others held their phones higher, recording, capturing what they now sensed was extraordinary. The older man leaned back slightly, settling into his composure again. Then, in a calm, quiet voice, soft enough that only the aggressor could hear, he said, "I tried to stop you not for me, but for you." The aggressor froze mid-breath. He opened his mouth, ready to insult or challenge, but no words came out. Something in that sentence hit him harder than any strike could have. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And it carried weight. The passengers leaned forward instinctively. They didn't understand why that line made the aggressor hesitate. But anyone with even a little understanding of discipline recognized it immediately. The older man wasn't just calm, he was in control. Every subtle movement, every word, every blink was intentional. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to hit. His presence alone communicated a power that no one could fake. The aggressor tried to regain composure. "You think you're scary?" He sneered, though the edge had left his voice. His movements were slower now, almost hesitant. The earlier rush of dominance had evaporated, replaced by confusion and fear he didn't yet understand. The older man's gaze stayed locked on him, unwavering. But for the first time, he allowed a hint of a smile, a small, knowing curve at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't amusement at the aggressor, but recognition of the inevitable. He glanced around the bus briefly, noticing subtle shifts. The young man by the window holding his phone tighter, the mother clutching her child, the teen peeking over his friend's shoulder. Every eye was on him now. And the tension wasn't just about fear, it was curiosity. Awe, the kind that comes when you sense someone is more than they appear. Then he spoke again, voice low but steady. "The real danger isn't standing in front of you." It was as if those words rippled through the air. The aggressor's chest rose sharply. His hands loosened from the seat. The weight of the calm, calculated presence in front of him pressed down in a way he couldn't fight against. Passengers began whispering now, more openly. "Who is this guy? I swear I've seen him somewhere." Phones focused. Zooms increased. The tension was now public, undeniable. The older man remained still, but the aura of impending consequence grew. The aggressor realized that whatever this was, whatever he had challenged, was far beyond his understanding. His earlier confidence was gone. He wasn't just facing a man who could defend himself. He was facing someone whose entire being radiated control, experience, and authority. Every small movement of the older man carried weight. Every blink, every subtle shift of his feet signaled preparation. The aggressor's attempts to regain dominance were futile, clumsy, and ineffective. A few more passengers whispered among themselves. One muttered under his breath, "He doesn't even need to fight. He could end this any second." The older man finally exhaled audibly, not aggressively, not sharply. Just a single, steady breath. It was enough. The tension hit its peak. The aggressor's mind raced, realizing too late that this confrontation was no longer about proving toughness. It was about survival, about respecting boundaries he hadn't even realized existed. His chest heaved, his pride shattered, and for the first time, the older man's calm became terrifying. And as the bus slowed toward the next stop, Everyone watching felt it, the suspense, the delay, the inevitability. The moment was building. Something was coming. The reveal of the older man's identity, his skill, his authority, and the consequences awaiting the aggressor, all were poised perfectly, just out of reach. Every passenger now knew without a doubt that this wasn't an ordinary man. This wasn't just an older man who had been shoved and insulted. There was history, there was control, there was mastery, and the aggressor, in his arrogance, had unknowingly stepped into the wrong world entirely. The bus doors hissed open at the next stop. The tension didn't drop. Everyone held their breath, waiting, knowing, sensing that the real story, the part that would explain everything, was about to unfold. Because the older man had already decided how this would end. And it wouldn't be the way the aggressor expected. The bus slowed to a stop at the next intersection. The air inside was thick, heavy with anticipation. Passengers barely breathed. Every single person had their eyes glued to the older man and the aggressor kneeling awkwardly on the floor. Phones were raised, capturing every second. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is this guy? I swear I've seen him somewhere." Then it happened. A single man's voice came from the back of the bus, calm, steady, firm. "That's him," he said. Heads snapped around, phones shifted focus. Murmurs grew louder. People were leaning forward, craning their necks to see better. The older man's identity was becoming clear. The tall aggressor's head jerked up. What did you say?" he stammered. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. A woman near the window whispered, almost reverently, "It can't be." And it was. The older man was recognized instantly. Steven Seagal. The room's energy shifted instantly. A quiet awe replaced fear, but the tension remained. People had underestimated him. They hadn't believed that someone so calm, so measured, could carry decades of skill and discipline behind every small movement. The aggressor now fully understood what had happened on the bus. Every shove, every attempt at intimidation had been redirected effortlessly. Every physical move had been anticipated. He had been utterly outclassed without a single punch being thrown. The older man adjusted his jacket slowly, deliberately, as if the entire episode had been a minor inconvenience. He spoke softly, almost conversationally. "Control doesn't need to shout." The crowd's whispers turned to astonished murmurs. Some passengers gasped audibly. Others couldn't believe what they were witnessing. A few older passengers exchanged knowing glances, as if they had expected this all along. The aggressor tried to scramble to his feet. His movements were clumsy, uncertain. He looked around, hoping someone might intervene, but no one did. The entire bus was frozen. Even the driver's eyes were wide behind the rearview mirror. The older man's voice cut through the tension again, steady and deliberate. "You tested someone you didn't understand. That was your mistake." The aggressor swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine fear. Not of pain, not of a fight, but of consequence. The kind of consequence that doesn't need theatrics to be felt. Passengers now had full context. This wasn't some ordinary older man defending himself. This was a man with decades of martial arts mastery, someone who had trained in discipline, balance, and control at levels most people couldn't even comprehend. And the aggressor had walked straight into his path. One passenger whispered into her phone, recording everything. "This is unreal. He didn't even fight him, and the guy's down already." The tall man attempted a final glance around the bus, hoping for validation, for backup, for a chance to reclaim some semblance of dominance. But there was none. Everyone's attention was fixed on the older man. The lesson was clear: arrogance misjudged, pride punished. The older man stepped forward slowly, giving the aggressor space, never raising his voice, never showing a hint of anger. The subtle command of presence, posture, and control was overwhelming. "Now," the older man said, "you'll think twice before provoking someone in silence again." The aggressor nodded weakly, swallowing hard. His chest heaved. Pride destroyed. Confidence evaporated. The humiliation was total, but it had come without a single punch thrown. Passengers started whispering again, this time in recognition. "That's Steven Seagal, the martial arts guy. He didn't even touch him." The bus driver cleared his throat, finally finding his voice. "Maybe next stop you step off." The older man nodded once. Calm, composed. He didn't need to explain. The aggressor knew. Everyone on the bus knew. And then, as the bus doors opened at the next stop, a few people approached cautiously, some asking for autographs, others just staring in awe. The older man smiled slightly, polite but firm, and exited the bus with effortless composure. The aggressor stayed kneeling for a moment longer, absorbing the lesson he had learned the hard way: respect doesn't come from loud words, physical size, or intimidation. It comes from mastery, control, and presence. The entire bus was left in stunned silence. People exchanged stories, whispered, and shared videos. Social media posts were already being drafted mid-ride. Everyone had witnessed something extraordinary, a rare, real-life demonstration of skill, composure, and authority. No fight, no blood, no chaos. Just precision, control, and absolute dominance. And as the bus pulled away, everyone who had been on board knew the truth. The older man, calm and composed, had completely reshaped the energy of the room with nothing more than presence, awareness, and decades of discipline. The lesson lingered in the air long after he was gone. Arrogance is punished. Respect is earned, and strength doesn't need to prove itself loudly. The bus doors closed behind him, leaving the passengers in a quiet, stunned reverence. No one spoke for a moment. Not because they were afraid, but because they were processing. What they had just witnessed didn't feel like a typical confrontation. It didn't feel like a fight. It was something deeper. The tall aggressor sat on the floor, chest heaving, pride shattered. He wasn't injured, he hadn't been hit, but he had been defeated, completely, by calmness, by discipline, by a lifetime of mastery that made every move purposeful. A teenager whispered to his friend, barely audible. That was unreal. He didn't even touch him. The older man, stepping down the bus steps into the sunlight, radiated the same calm composure he had carried the entire time. His posture was relaxed, his movements smooth, his presence unshakable. The incident was over, yet the lesson lingered, heavier than the bus's engine hum. People who had been recording already started sharing clips online. Comments were being drafted mid-ride. That calmness is terrifying. Respect shouldn't depend on fear, it's earned. And that was the truth he embodied. Seagal didn't humiliate the aggressor. He didn't need to. He didn't raise his voice, strike a single blow, or prove dominance through force. He simply demonstrated something far more powerful: control, awareness, and the quiet authority of someone who has mastered himself. It was a reminder that true strength isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to humiliate others to assert itself, and it certainly doesn't rely on anger or aggression. For the aggressor, the lesson was bitter but unforgettable. For the passengers, it was inspiring. And for anyone watching online later, it became a model for how to deal with disrespect, arrogance, or provocation in life. Stay calm, stay aware, and let your presence do the talking. A few passengers approached Stephen as he walked away, shyly asking for pictures or autographs. He smiled, polite but distant, nodding with measured patience. He didn't linger, didn't boast, didn't need validation. His authority was self-contained. A mother quietly whispered to her child, "You see, you don't need to be loud to be strong." A student muttered to a friend, "That's a life lesson right there. I'll never forget it." Even the bus driver shook his head, smiling slightly in disbelief. "I've driven this road for years and I've never seen anything like that." As the sun glinted off the city streets, the incident faded into memory, but its impact remained. Everyone on that bus had seen firsthand the power of calmness and discipline. Everyone understood, even subconsciously, that arrogance and aggression have limits, but mastery has none. Seagal's presence wasn't just physical. It was psychological, moral, and emotional. Respect didn't come from fear or dominance. It came from humanity, experience, and self-mastery. And that's the ultimate takeaway. Respect should never depend on who someone is, what they look like, or how much they can intimidate. Respect should be given because it is the right thing to do. The bus rolled back into motion. Passengers whispered, exchanged stories, replayed moments on their phones. The aggressor remained in his seat, quiet, reflective, no longer attempting dominance. The older man walked away into the afternoon light, his silhouette calm, controlled, and almost untouchable. And for anyone who had watched, anyone who had witnessed the incident in real time or online later, the lesson was clear: strength is measured not by how loudly you fight, but by how calmly you command. And if you believe respect should be given to everyone, no matter their size, age, or appearance, comment respect below. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room teaches the loudest lesson of all.